Almost trapezoidal in shape, with its longest distance approximately 750 kilometers and its widest distance 850 kilometers, Syria is a crossroads of different geographical features. It's straddled by mountains, steppes, valleys and plains along the coast. Although the desert covers 48% of the national territory, with a few luxuriant oases like Palmyra and Saqqneh, the landscape is of an infinite diversity. Syria is part of the al-Hamad, which covers portions of Syria, Iraq, Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Its border on the west is the Orontes Valley, and on the east the Euphrates. Founded in the 3rd millennium BC, Damascus was an important cultural and commercial center due to its geographical position at the crossroads of the east and west between Africa and Asia. The old city of Damascus is considered to be among the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world. Syria's capital is wild and exotic, still teeming with the kind of raw and primordial vibrancy that's disappeared from so many cities throughout the passage of time. It's the cradle of historical civilizations, constituting a beacon of science and art over time, and a historical encyclopedia which tells a great part of the history of humanity. At the same time, it represents a historical reference for comparing the systems of architecture and town planning over several thousands of years. Located in front of the citadel, the statue of Saladin is an oversized equestrian bronze statue depicting the Kurdish Ayyubid Sultan Saladin. The statue depicts Saladin in the same pose and the same dress as he appears in a number of 19th century Western depictions of the Crusades. Saladin appears not as an individual warrior, but as a leader embodying a wave of popular feeling against the Franks. The old city of Damascus, dating back to medieval times, is surprisingly quite well preserved, encircled by 5 kilometers of strong walls. The 13th century city wall, which is almost rectangular in shape, is flanked by 12 towers and 3 monumental gates. The 13th century Ayyubid rampart ran alongside the original rampart built at the end of the 11th century by Seljuk princes. A large proportion of the huge surrounding wall remains intact. Most of the towers have survived, including a few where 3 stories, the vaulted galleries linking the towers on the ground floor and the parapet have been preserved. Although areas outside the walls that represent the expansion of the city from the 13th century are considered to be related to the old city in terms of historical significance and provide its setting and context, the key attributes of outstanding universal value lie within the boundary. These include the plan of the city and its dense urban fabric, city walls and gates, as well as its 125 protected monuments, including the citadel. Although the importance of any military structure cannot be denied as it's the basic defense of a city, the importance, however, grew in the Ayyubid period. Constantly threatened by the Christians and Muslims alike, the cities in the Ayyubid time period could be attacked at any time, thus proper measures needed to be taken for the empire's defense. This constant threat is what produced the greatest military architecture found in the Islamic world. The citadels are one of the finest examples of a military defense stronghold, and the Ayyubids built many of them throughout their empire. The Citadel of Damascus is a bastion located in the northwest corner of the fortified Old City. It's a masterpiece of military architecture, and its courtyards, walls, and 2 enormous entrances illustrate numerous historical events, including the conquest by Timur in 1400. The majority of buildings constructed inside the citadel have been destroyed, apart from 2 large complexes which are still standing and are preserved with their original vaulting. They include a large ceremonial room with a central dome, covering an area of 400 square meters, which leads to a gallery that links the eastern gate of the citadel to the northern gate, and a large rectangular building preserved over 2 stories, with a surface area of 1,180 square meters. The present city walls, the citadel, some mosques and tombs survive from the medieval period, and a large part of the heritage of the city, including palaces and private houses, dates from after the Ottoman conquest of the early 16th century. The city is closely linked with important historical events, ideas and traditions, especially from the Islamic period. These have helped to shape the image of the city and impact of Islamic history and culture. The focal point of any Middle Eastern city is the souk, or marketplace, a labyrinth of alleys, stores and tiny shops that also include ancient mosques and shrines. Souk al-hamidiyah is the most famous covered bazaar in the old city, which leads to the ruins of the Temple of Jupiter and to the Umayyad Mosque, built during the Ottoman era in the 18th century. As soon as the visitor dives into the old town from any of the entrances from the modern city, he dives into a maze of alleys. He's surrounded by mosques and churches, remnants of the old defensive wall, with restaurants hidden behind small doors. From every corner, the age of the houses dawns on visitors. It's quite easy to imagine that life might not have been very different here many centuries ago. Shopping for basic necessities such as clothing, foodstuffs, spices and toiletries is generally done in a large outdoor market, just like it is throughout the Middle East and North Africa. People can buy anything in one of these markets or souks. Most of the souk is arched over with tall iron ribs with corrugated metal. The souk is 600 meters long, 15 meters wide and about 2 stories high. Its shops offer the famous Damascus textiles and antiques. Shopping is a social event. Most people go in groups or with a number of family members. These markets are really a local phenomenon and are simply the places where most people shop. However, industrialization and development are changing the face of the souk. The streets and alleys of the old city begin to bustle once again as the setting sun loses its strength and the cool shadows lengthen. Merchants pull out chairs and some relax with a water pipe and a cup of tea. The shopping is generally dominated by women and their children, while most of the shopkeepers are men. There are no price tags, as everything except food is negotiable. The souk is generally composed of small shops, usually organized by type of item. It appears as a labyrinth, a maze full of treasure. They're typically open in the morning, closed in the afternoon, and reopen in the evening for their busiest time. In any souk, visitors are likely to see a brilliant menagerie of people in traditional and modern clothing, the new mixing with the old. At the end of souk al-hamidiyah stands one of the most famous mosques in the Islamic world, the Umayyad Mosque, a wonder of Islamic architecture and a jewel of Damascus. To enter the mosque, visitors cross a spacious square, passing typical Roman columns and arches, and the remains of the main entrance of a Roman temple, built in the 3rd century to honor the god Jupiter. The main courtyard of the temple was large with high columns. Damascus preserves a few traces of its long history prior to the Arabic conquest, including some artifacts from the Roman period. The Umayyad Great Mosque, also known as the Grand Mosque of Damascus, is one of the largest mosques in the world and one of the oldest sites of continuous prayer since the rise of Islam. As such, it constitutes an important cultural, social, and artistic development. The Umayyad Mosque in Damascus was accordingly a magnificent structure, the work of thousands of craftsmen of Coptic, Persian, Indian, and Byzantine origin. The mosque complex included a prayer hall, a vast courtyard, and hundreds of rooms for visiting pilgrims. The Aramaeans originally built a temple here in 100 BC for Hadad, the god of storms and lightning. A basalt artifact dating from this period, depicting a sphinx, has been discovered in the northeast corner of the mosque. In the early 1st century AD, the Romans arrived and built a massive temple to Jupiter over the Aramaean temple. In the late 4th century, the temple area became a Christian sacred site. The temple of Jupiter was destroyed, and a church dedicated to John the Baptist was built in its place. The church was and is believed to enshrine the head of the Baptist, and the site became an important pilgrimage destination in the Byzantine era. Initially, the Muslim conquest of Damascus in 636 didn't affect the church, as the building was shared by Muslim and Christian worshippers. It remained a church and continued to attract Christian pilgrims. The Muslims built a mud brick structure against the southern wall where they could pray. After touring the courtyard and arcades of the mosque, visitors enter the prayer hall from the main entrance. Here, there are 2 parallel lines of columns with Corinthian capitals dividing the hall into 3 parts. Each is roofed with a hermetical ceiling, covered with lead boards from the outside. Right in the center of the hall, there are 4 huge beams bearing the 34-meter-high octagonal eagle dome. Sheltered inside the mosque is the small chapel and shrine of John the Baptist, Prophet Yahya to the Muslims, where tradition holds that the head of John is buried. One legend says that when the church was demolished, his head was found underneath, complete with skin and hair. This head is believed by some to possess magical powers and continues to be the focus of the Mandaeans' annual pilgrimage when they press their foreheads against the metal grill of the shrine and reportedly experience prophetic visions. With its great mosque at the heart of an urban plan, deriving from the Greco-Roman grid, the city provided the exemplary model for the Arab-Muslim world. The southern wall in the direction of Holy Mecca has 4 niches, named mihrabs, ornamented with Quranic scripts, inscribed on colored marble, inlaid with mother of pearl. Each niche was dedicated to one of the 4 main cults of Islam, Hanbali, Shafi'i, Hanafi, and Maliki. The urban fabric underwent important transformations with the rise to power of the Abbasids. The urban centre ceased to be a unified organism and was divided up into autonomous quarters, each equipped with its own institutions, mosques, public baths, markets and police corps. In this way, the rectangular blocks from the Hellenistic grid were transformed into the characteristic Islamic urban fabric. Al-Atsem Palace, located south of the Umayyad Mosque, was built in 1750 by the Ottoman governor of Damascus, Asad Pasha al-Atsem. The architecture of the palace embodies the culmination of Damascus domestic typology at its most extravagant. The central courtyards featured fountains and are lined with trees and overhanging vines. The structure of the interior courtyard facade is punctuated by iwans that face columned porticos. This creates textured spatial walls that are in contrast to the flat exterior walls. This visual play between private and public space differentiation through the use of architectural elements is a direct comment on the balance between the private and public functions the palace serves. Simultaneously decadent and serene, this duality is achieved through the juxtaposition of the elaborate and opulent interior decoration and the starkly minimalist exterior facades of the wings, articulated in traditional Damascus ablaq designs of alternating stripes of black and white stone. The palace has three wings, the haramlik and the salamlik. The family wing or haramlik is a private space that's connected to the kitchen and servant quarters. The public area reserved for the outside guests, called the salamlik, contains the formal halls, reception areas, and exclusive courtyards for entertainment. Bazaars make up an important part of the urban tissue of the old city, which used to have mosques, khans, and hammams, in addition to a large number of residential houses, which form the largest part of the magic maze of lanes and alleys. Damascus bazaars are perhaps the most diversified markets in the world. They feature a friendly and intimate ambience in that they retain the old Oriental style, pervaded with scents of spices, ground coffee, and various other perfumes. Colourful merchandise displayed on stands draws the attention of visitors, attracted by the calls of street vendors promoting their goods. Damascus bazaars are renowned for trading in spices and herbs. There's a large assortment of herbs and spices. Some of them are local in origin, others are imported from the East. These bazaars played an important economic and financial role in the history of the city before banks were established. They were and still are the main centres where cultures as well as goods meet. For many centuries, the khans were the nerve centre of the population of Damascus and its countryside. Built by the Mamelukes and the Ottomans, they formed an important part of the architectural structure of these bazaars and had an important role in the commercial deals struck here. A khan is a huge building with a wide facade, with a stone arch and a wooden gate, high enough to allow loaded camels to get inside to the spacious courtyard. Khans were the hotels and depots of the old times. They used to receive caravans coming from different corners of the world. They're a square or rectangular courtyard surrounded on four sides by rooms and halls that were used as offices for merchants and businessmen, depots, stables for camels and horses, or as service rooms. The first floor was usually used as a hotel. The space of the courtyard is divided into 9 equal square modules, each covered with a dome raised on a drum pierced with 20 windows. The khan is built of alternating series of basalt and limestone. Khans are no longer used for their original purpose, but are used as trading centres instead. Other khans have been adapted for cultural uses, galleries, hotels, or handcraft bazaars. In spite of Islam's prevailing influence, traces of earlier cultures, particularly Roman and Byzantine, continue to be seen in the city. Straight Street, or in Latin Via Recta, is the Roman street that runs from east to west in the old city of Damascus. Under the Greeks, the old city of Damascus was designed after the grid pattern designed by Hippodamus. The street was divided into 3 main lanes. The central lane was used by animals and carts, while the 2 side ones were higher than the central one, covered with roofs, supported by columns bearing statues. Via Recta was widened and became a colonnaded thoroughfare used by pedestrians. Almost 700 meters to the west of Bab Sharqi is a Roman monumental arch that was excavated and rebuilt in 1947 by the Syrian Department of Antiquities. It's here that the intersection of Via Recta and the north-south Cardo Maximus has been located. On the right-hand side in ancient times stood a Byzantine church dedicated to the Virgin Mary and called Mariamye. Today, on the same site, stands a church which serves as the seat of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. The arrangement of the component elements of Damascus is reminiscent of the Christian churches of Syria and Armenia, and represents a significant example of Umayyad art that continues through the master craftsmen employed, the tradition of Byzantine art. The important Christian minority consolidated itself in the northeast quarters of the city, around the churches and sites associated with the conversion of St. Paul. Modern Syria is officially secular, and Syrian Christians are generally able to live and worship in peace alongside their Muslim neighbours. Given its rich religious heritage, it's no surprise that Syria abounds in fascinating religious sites. Ruined pagan temples dedicated to Baal and Jupiter, ancient monasteries and synagogues, and mosques, churches and shrines that are still full of worshippers. The chapel of Saint Ananias is the ancient alleged house of Saint Ananias in the old Christian quarter. It's at the very end of Via Recta. Ananias, the first bishop in Damascus, believed in Christ and made his house a safe place to spread Christianity. Ananias preached secretly in his house and was persecuted by the Romans under Licinius, who imprisoned, flogged, and stoned him to death. With his own hands and in his house, he baptized Saul, the Jew who converted to Christianity and became St. Paul the Messenger. 5 meters below ground level, the church is supposedly the cellar of the house of Ananias, but more likely it was built at the level of the Roman street. The church, which has been restored many times, is the only early Christian house of worship from the 1st century to survive in the city. The city had to look to its defences from its earliest beginnings. Over the centuries, the Hittites, the Assyrians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines and Muslim rulers left their architectural stamp on the city, and the walls and gates of Damascus reflect these influences. The number of existing gates varies with the source, although the most frequently stated number is 8. Consequently, Damascus is referred to as the 8-gated city. East of the Gate of Paradise, the traveller discovers the celebrated Gate of the Moon, a reminder that Syria's oldest gods were pagan. Named after the last of the Byzantine defenders of Damascus, the Gate of Thomas marks the entrance to the Christian quarter of the Old City. The Chapel of St. Paul is a modern stone chapel in Damascus that incorporates materials from the Bab Kizan, the ancient city gate. After his baptism on the Via Recta, St. Paul began the tireless Christian preaching that would characterize the rest of his life. The city exhibits outstanding evidence of the civilizations which created it: Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic. In particular, the Umayyad Caliphate created Damascus as its capital, setting the scene for the city's ongoing development as a living Muslim Arab city.